What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is today is May 12th, 2024, and the time is about 8:43 p.m. where I'm at right now. Let's get into the stories today. I'm going to be speaking at a lower tone because I have some guests in the house. They're all trying to rest and stuff like that. So if anybody jumps into the chat, starts talking crazy to me, I will not be turning up on y'all. I will not be yelling at y'all, getting hot with y'all because I got to keep it down for the people that are here. But I will be covering some interesting stories today. And once again, shout out to all the new subscribers. In the past week, I've gotten close to over 100 subscribers, most of them Muslim, most of the people coming in, checking out the videos that I made, traveling throughout the lands of the world, right? Different countries and stuff like that, going to masjids and Juma and different places. Shout out to everybody who's coming in. And I hope you have that same energy, that same sort of Islamic fervor to talk about these issues that relate to Black people as well. So let's get into it. The first story we're going to be covering today is from the New York Times. All of these stories are from the New York Times. Sheriff releases body camera footage in police killing of Airman in his home. The footage shows that the Airman was holding a gun when he opened his door to a deputy, who then began firing. The Airman's family has called the killing unjustified. Now, I do not like how the New York Times just opened up in the subtext of the title of this article, saying that the airman was holding a gun. This makes it seem like the person was threatening the police officer, that the person might not have been a legal gun owner, that his gun somehow came from a nefarious source or something like that, when this is not the case at all. As we will see in this article, hopefully, I did not read this article ahead of time, so this is a live reaction to it. The person that was murdered in this case was a legal gun owner. He had the right to have a gun. He did not know that the police were at his door. If you watch the footage, and I will not be showing the footage in this live stream, the police, when he came to his door, knocked and then hid away from the keyhole and did not answer the question when the person who was having his door knocked on asked, "Who is it?" The police did not say, "Police, open up," or "Police, come out with your hands up," or anything like that. You can find the footage on X or Twitter or anywhere else on social media. I will not be showing it because YouTube likes to strike my channel. They've been trying to get me out the paint for a long time, so I will not be showing any of that graphic footage, but it is easy to find, and I will be giving my reaction to this article as we go. So here is Shantamika Fortson, the mother of Roger Fortson, a senior airman in the Air Force, held a photo of her son during a news conference on Thursday, in the caption right here. Absolutely horrible that this mother had to cry for her lost son, who will never come back. This was written by Edward Medina, published on May 9th, 2024. Under mounting pressure to offer a justification for the fatal police shooting of a U.S. Air Force senior airman in his own apartment last week, a Florida sheriff on Thursday released body camera footage of the deadly encounter. The footage shows senior airman Roger Fortson, 23, answering the door of his apartment in the Florida Panhandle and immediately being shot by a deputy from the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. The video also shows that Airman Fortson was holding a gun, and the authorities have maintained that the deputy reacted in self-defense. The release of the footage came amid growing questions from the airman's family and their lawyers, including Ben Crump, who has represented the family of George Floyd, who had accused the deputy of entering the wrong apartment, of not knocking or announcing himself, and of bursting through the door. This article right here is pissing me off to no end, how they are writing this to make it seem like Roger Fortson was somehow in the wrong. The police did go to the wrong door. If you watch the video of this encounter, there is a woman, a white woman, who says that there's a domestic disturbance in the apartment and that the person lives on this floor and at this door. And then the police goes up to the wrong floor or the wrong door. I forgot exactly which one, but then hides behind the door, does not announce who he is, and then as soon as the person opens the door, in Florida, a state that encourages citizens to have guns, a state that makes it easier and easier every single year for citizens to have guns, just opens fire as soon as this black person answers the door with his gun, not knowing who is behind the door. Right? This is absolutely a travesty that the New York Times is writing this story like this. And to be honest, I don't even know why sometimes I even read from the New York Times, because they've been exposed for having bias and uncharacteristically negligent, just to say the least, writing for journalism when it comes to the war in Israel against Hamas, right? So yeah, it's very interesting that the New York Times is framing the story this way, and I really, really despise it that it's written this way. But continuing here, some of those accusations appeared to be undercut by the body camera video. The lawyer said they were based on information from Airman Fortson's girlfriend, who had been on a video call with him during the episode. They did not dispute that Airman Fortson was armed, but said that he had every right to be as a legal gun owner in his own home. Asked if he believed the outcome would have been different if Airman Fortson was not black, Mr. Crump said that is something that America has to answer. The footage released Thursday shows that the deputy, who has not been identified, had been told by a woman at the apartment complex in Fort Walton Beach in the Florida Panhandle that he should go to apartment number 1401 because of an apparent domestic dispute there. It is unclear who the woman is, why the deputy had been called in the first place, and whether the apartment number was correctly identified. When the deputy arrives at apartment 1401, the footage shows his first knocks without identifying himself. He then knocks again, says sheriff's office, open the door, and steps away from the door. Seconds later, the deputy shifts to the other side of the door, knocks, and announces himself again, the footage shows. Airman Fortson then opens the door, holding in his right hand a gun that appears to be pointed downward. The deputy says, "Step back," and then fires several times at the airman, who raises his left hand in front of his chest, according to the footage. After Airman Fortson falls back, the deputy yells, "Drop the gun." "I don't have it," Airman Fortson replies. The deputy calls in emergency medical services and tells Airman Fortson, "Do not move." Mr. Crump said on Thursday that Airman Fortson was shot 6 times and that he was alone in his apartment. Now, I did not hear or see the part of the video where he said sheriff's office. Pardon if I missed that. But it is also possible that Roger, if I believe right, his name is Roger, Airman Fortson. I'll say Airman Fortson. Pardon if I forgot his name. Yes, Roger Fortson. It is possible if Roger did not actually hear it. The man was knocking at the door. The man might have been nervous or scared. Plus, also, let's keep it real. Jack boys sometimes say, "Police, open up." A lot of people have been kidnapped, abducted, murdered because the person that identified themselves said it's the police, and then the person automatically freezes up and doesn't react in the hostile way that they would if a civilian was coming at them trying to do something malicious. So it is possible that Airman Fortson in Florida, one of the most dangerous states in the nation, a state where a lot of people have guns, a state where a lot of people are struggling to get by, so they're committing crimes of passion and violent crimes to take other people's property, that Airman Fortson thought, this might be a setup. This might be a jack move. Let me get my piece. And this is what I am allowed to do as a citizen following my Second Amendment rights. So, yeah, let's continue here. So let me see. Mr. Crump said on Thursday, Mr. Crump said on Thursday that Airman Fortson was shot 6 times and that he was alone in his apartment. Sheriff Eric Aden said at a news conference on Thursday that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement would handle the criminal investigation into the shooting. The state attorney's office will also review the episode. The sheriff did not take questions on Thursday. Mr. Crump released a separate footage on Thursday that he said Airman Fortson's girlfriend had recorded while on FaceTime with him that day. The footage begins moments after Airman Fortson was shot. He is heard heaving and says, "I can't breathe." A man in the video appears to tell the medics who arrived that Airman Fortson had been holding a weapon when the door was open. In a statement, the airman's family said they remained adamant that the police had the wrong apartment and that the body camera footage had raised a troubling question. Why did the deputy not order Airman Fortson to drop his weapon before firing? Well, we know why, because he was a black man with a weapon. This is something that the white supremacists believe is the most dangerous thing on the planet. Going back to this part, there is no reason to continue to write in this article that Airman Fortson might have been the person who was suspect of having a domestic disturbance in his apartment. You cannot have a domestic disturbance in your own apartment if you are in it alone. Let's repeat. This should be common sense to everybody. You cannot be abusing your girlfriend, abusing your wife, if you are literally alone in your apartment, FaceTiming with your girl, even if you are shouting at her on the phone. There is no way anybody can construe that or confuse that for that being domestic abuse, right? Right? Unless you're hearing, tables crashing over, people shouting back, stop, stop in different voices. It is one man in his apartment. There is no reason to continue to write in this article. He might have been the actual suspect. Continuing here. Hours before the release of the body camera footage, Mr. Crump held a news conference with Airman Fortson's relatives, including his mother, Shantamika Fortson. Miss Fortson said that her son was known as Mr. Make It Happen, and that he loved his younger siblings, and that he had joined the military to help his family get ahead. My child bought me an Infinity, a brand new car, she said at the news conference, where she cradled a framed photo of Airman Fortson in his military uniform. He was trying to give me everything that I never could get for myself. Mr. Crump said that his message to the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office was that when you make a mistake, you own up to it. You don't try to justify killing a good guy, he said. Alexis Piqueto, a professor of criminology at the University of Miami, said that the body camera footage was just one big piece of a jigsaw puzzle in the case. Other factors, such as the initial 911 dispatch call and interviews with the woman who led the deputy to Airman Fortson's apartment, would offer a fuller picture of what may have gone wrong. Absolutely horrible and horrific that this happened. Now, this is the part of my video where everybody turns it off. Nobody likes what I have to say next, but this is the absolute truth. The gun culture in America, the idea, the belief that every citizen has the right to have guns will continue to cause bloodshed like this to happen. In other countries, like I said at the beginning of this live stream, I'm in Budapest, Hungary right now. Hearing about police murdering citizens at the rate that it happens in the United States is unthinkable, unimaginable, unheard of. And most Hungarians like it this way. I repeat, most Europeans like it that in their country, citizens do not have a right to have a weapon. And if they do have a right to have a weapon, it is very, very hard to get your hands on such weapons. Meanwhile, in the United States, we allow children to be murdered every single year in our schools. We allow police to get murdered every single year in our streets. And we allow innocent black men to be shot like Roger Fortson was because of this sick belief that if we have guns as Americans, especially as black Americans, we will be able to defend ourselves from the white supremacists who are out there to take our lives, or even worse, an even more twisted way of thinking, that we are able to defend ourselves against other niggas who might try to take our lives as well. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Or we can't get rid of the guns because guns are everywhere. Or, the guns do make us safer because it takes a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun. How many more black people, how many more innocent children, how many more police have to die before Americans wake up and realize this gun culture will cause more people like Roger Fortson to lose their lives? It's sickening to me. Of course, white supremacy is at play. Of course, racism is at play. But the proliferation of weapons means that police are in actual fear of their lives. And this fear is not unfounded. Police get murdered every single year by civilians, which is not okay. They are working class people who deserve to be able to go home to their families and their children, just like we all do, who are not police. And the same thing applies to civilians as well. The police are out here just trying to do their jobs. But if they see a citizen with a gun, they are going to react this way. This is partially because the police are tuned up because we have so many weapons, but also another thing is the racism and white supremacy, because there have been instances where white men literally fight the police, shoot back at the police, and then they get arrested without a scar in their body. Meanwhile, as long as we're even holding a gun, we get murdered. So where are all the black Second Amendment people at right now? If you're a black man who loves guns, tell me how the gun is continuing to make us safer, because Roger Fortson lost his life because of a gun. This is the actual facts. And it's very, very likely, we all know this, that the police officer will most likely be able to get away with this because police are able to say in a court of law that they had subjectively determined that their lives were in danger. Therefore, they will be able to walk away scot-free from this case. And this is sickening. This is absolutely sickening. We should not live in a society like this. If we lived in a society where civilians did not have a right to own weapons, where there were not so many weapons on the street, this sort of killing would cause the police to be flat out taken to jail, right? Because we don't hear about these murders in other places. We would be able to say justifiably that the police should be taken away in handcuffs, thrown under the jail, and throw away the key and all that sort of stuff. But because we live in stupid ass America, or y'all live in stupid ass America, and you continue to worship a big black metal phallus that you secretly want to fillet, we are going to continue to have blood on our streets and blood on our hands. But that's y'all's problem. Y'all come to me and explain into the comment section why the gun continues to make us safer as black men. It doesn't. It doesn't. The number one killer of black people, of young black men, is gun violence, particularly from other black men. But that's because we have so many weapons out in the streets, and people are not able to handle their disputes with their fists, or God forbid, with knives. And we don't want that either. And of course, some dumbass is going to jump in the comments and say, in the UK, they have knife crime all the time. In the UK, we have people out in the streets literally fighting with swords as if they're like knights from King Arthur's Round Table or something like that. Yeah, that's true. But the amount of damage you can do with a gun does not compare with a long ass butcher knife that you can pull out and shank somebody with. You feel me, bruv? You get what I'm saying? But nonetheless, people are still going to continue to believe in this fallacy. Meanwhile, the rest of the world looks at America like idiots. Anybody who's going to jump into the comments and defend gun ownership on behalf of whatever, the NRA or your own personal beliefs that the gun makes you more American and free, the rest of the world will look at you and say, you are a dumbass. Think about that. Think about that. Even third world nations, even in Nigeria, even in Cameroon, even in Argentina, even in Colombia, even in Mexico, right? All these other places will look at America and say the gun culture there is sick and disgusting, right? And for anybody who's going to say, well, in Mexico, they have the right to have guns, I'm going to ask you this question. Is America not a better nation than Mexico? Do we not believe that America is the greatest nation that ever existed? Is America not the richest, most powerful, most prosperous nation that ever existed in history? If you're going to say, well, in Mexico, they have this, are you then saying that we are equivalent to a third world nation? I would argue, no, we are better than that. We are better than Colombia. We are better than Argentina. We are better than Mexico, better than Brazil, better than Nigeria, better than all of these places because of the wealth that was created in our nation, and also the culture that we've created in our nation, and also the democratic ideals that we hold as Americans in our nation. Yet and still, you would still say, well, it's going to keep us free. Whatever, man. I can't even argue with you. You're going to believe what you want to believe. Roger Fortson's going to die. Some other black man is going to die at the hands of weapons, and we're going to continue to be in the same loop. Y'all continue to worship that gun. All right? Continuing here with the second story that I want to cover today. As Biden struggles with black men, allies gather at White House. Aides of the president met with influential black male Democrats to discuss how to shore up his standing with a crucial group of voters before 2024. Now, let me talk about this. A lot of black people online are talking about how they're not going to vote, or they're getting off the Democratic plantation, or that Biden is not offering anything for black Americans, or that oh God, even worse, there's talking about voting for Trump or switching to the Republicans or the conservatives and that sort of stuff. Listen, I am no fan of Biden, and I posted on my community tab, I endorse Cornel West for president. But what we are facing with Trump is the most dangerous type of white supremacy, the white supremacists who are in power and are naked in their ambition to actually destroy any opportunity for there to be democratic advancement. What we have in the U.S. is the opportunity to advance as a race of people together. And I'm not talking about black people or white people. I'm talking about the human race together, right? Our country is founded on the ideal that a nation is not based on a certain ethnicity, a certain race, a certain religion, but that all people can come together and believe in these democratic ideals and then be called American. And that, now, of course, we have a culture under that, right? We have baseball, we have Britney Spears and pop music and jazz and the blues and all sorts of stuff that make us American. Blue jeans, Jordan sneakers, whatever you want to call it, right? But after all of that, what only unites us is the ideals. This is revolutionary compared to other nations. I'm in Hungary right now. If my black ass descendants stayed in Hungary for another 100 years, they would never be considered true Hungarians because of the ethnic and racial implications of being Hungarian. The same thing does not apply to America, right? The same thing does not apply to America. If you move to America today and eventually gain your citizenship, you are just as American as me. That's how our system works. That's how our country should work, right? And what Trump wants to do is take away all that. He wants to bring back Christian nationalism. He wants to bring back white supremacist nationalism. He wants to make a country where if you don't fit a certain norm or a certain demographic, you will not be the type of American who actually has a voice or a say in this nation, right? And everything that he's trying to roll back, from voter rights to women's rights, and trying to increase like people having more rights to have guns and things like that, will cause irreparable harm to our advancement experiment as a human race together in this experiment, which is America, right? So let's jump into this article right here. I'm going to be reading it and reacting to it. And yeah, Reed J. Epstein and Maya King are the authors of this article. This was published a few months ago, back in December 12th, 2023. I did not read this article. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say and giving my reaction and take on it. So, as President Biden's allies grow more worried that his standing is slipping among black men, his aides met on Tuesday at the White House with influential black male Democrats to discuss how to increase his popularity with a crucial group of voters before the 2024 election. Several attendees said there was general agreement that Mr. Biden, during both his 2020 campaign and his first 3 years in office, had paid more attention to black female voters than to black male ones. These people said they had suggested to Mr. Biden's aides that the president needed to make a specific argument about how his administration had improved the lives of black men. It's clear that there's been a focus on black women, and the question becomes, there been an equal focus on black men, said Cedric Richmond, a former Louisiana congressman and Biden administration official who is now a senior advisor at the Democratic National Committee and who was at the meeting. He added, there's been a mantra that black women are the base of the party, and I think it's black families that are the base of the party. That has the potential to separate the family unit by gender, which I think is just unfortunate. The afternoon meeting included, among others, Representative Stephen Horsford of Nevada, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Jamie Harrison, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis of Pennsylvania, who has warned publicly that Mr. Biden's standing with black voters has fallen, and Antoine Seawright and Clay Middleton, political operatives from South Carolina who are closely associated with Representative James E. Clyburn, a key Biden ally in the state. The group agreed that Mr. Biden had many accomplishments that had helped black men. Democrats, he said, are falling short in telling this story. We left the room acknowledging that we collectively have to do a better job communicating, said Kwame Raoul, the Attorney General of Illinois. Sometimes being awakened to a challenge is a good thing. The White House session followed months of nail biting among Democrats about rising skepticism of Mr. Biden among black voters, especially black men. Republicans have aimed to drive a wedge between black voters and the Democratic Party in recent cycles, arguing that former President Donald J. Trump's record on the economy and his passage of a criminal justice law were more beneficial for black communities, arguments that Democrats have dismissed as disinformation. Polling released by the New York Times and Siena College last month found that 22% of black voters in 6 of the most important presidential battleground states said they would support Mr. Trump against Mr. Biden next year, an alarming figure for Democrats given black voters decades-long loyalty to the party. At the meeting on Tuesday, led by Steve Benjamin, the director of the White House's Public Engagement Office, the black male allies of Mr. Biden were encouraged to recount what people in their communities and home districts have been saying about his administration and whether they would support him for a second term. There have been communication gaps, said Harold Love, a Tennessee state representative who is the incoming president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. He said the administration needed to tell people what Mr. Biden had done in plain language so they can understand. The White House declined to comment about the meeting. In interviews and focus groups, black men who express openness to supporting Mr. Trump have pointed to the former president's record on the economy and said their businesses and families fared better during his administration. Black Democrats have rebutted this idea, in some cases arguing that black men have been targeted by disinformation that, if crystallized in enough voters' minds, could endanger the president's already shaky standing with them. Mr. Raoul, the Illinois Attorney General, said that part of Mr. Biden's problem was that he had articulated a complex message that often ended up competing with easier to digest misinformation. Sometimes when you do a lot, it's difficult to convey it to folks who are used to consuming things in sound bites and who have been at times recipients of intentionally targeted misinformation, Mr. Raoul said on Tuesday. Democrats have emphasized earlier and more frequent outreach to black communities as important to winning their votes. Vice President Kamala Harris has frequently met with small groups of black men as she has traveled the country, and last month hosted a group of 10 black men in the news, media, and politics for dinner at her home in Washington. The party has also brought advertisements. Sorry, the party has also bought advertisements on black radio stations and placed digital ads geared towards young black voters. Mr. Benjamin's office in the White House has held frequent meetings with a variety of constituency groups, but the meeting on Tuesday followed a particularly bad stretch of polling for Mr. Biden. CNN polls released Monday found Mr. Biden trailing Mr. Trump by 10 percentage points in Michigan and 5 points in Georgia, both battleground states with large numbers of black voters. Even though Mr. Biden has no serious Democratic presidential challengers, the party's primary election in South Carolina on February 3rd will be an early test of black voters' enthusiasm. Black voters made up nearly 60% of the Democratic electorate in the state in 2020 when Mr. Biden's victory there set him on the path to the White House. No other Democrats have made a significant investment in the state's primary this year, but the South Carolina Democratic Party on Monday nevertheless began a statewide voter outreach program, complete with a 50-person staff and a six-figure investment. Mr. Middleton, a senior advisor to Mr. Biden's South Carolina campaign, said the meeting was ultimately meant to help determine how best to relay the president's accomplishments and his plans for a second term to black men across the country, with a focus on battleground states. If we ignore what black men are saying, then we would have some problems, Mr. Middleton said. This is to say, we will not ignore. This is the thing that I find very frustrating about this article. I don't know why today I'm having the toughest time with the New York Times, but goddamn, why didn't you at least say something that black men want? Right? If it's reparations, if it's reparations for slavery, if it's you know the ending of the mass incarceration state that overly affects black men, if you're talking about wiping out nonviolent offenses on people's records, if you're talking about banning the criminal history box on job applications, if you're talking about making it easier for black men to be able to get loans to go to university or college despite their backgrounds, if you're making it easier for black men to be able to get jobs with the federal government, like at the post office or something like that, if you're talking about actual substantive issues that relate to black men in the article, this would actually make more sense. But what it sounds like in the article here is like they're saying we're going to send Kamala Harris to invite you to a fried chicken dinner at her house, right? And then that's it, right? We just want to hear you. We want to hear you. We want to see you. This corporate double speak, this political, double talk that they like to use that says we hear you, we see you, but we don't want to actually do anything to make a difference. Now, I am not an expert on everything that the Biden administration has done, but I would say that doing nothing is better than the something that Trump will do if he does get in office again. I repeat, no harm is better than a lot of damn harm. No harm is better than a lot of damn harm. What we have in America is a broken society. But just like if you saw a man on the side of the road with his bones broken all over his body, possibly you being a unprofessional person who is not an EMS or something like that, trying to pick this person up or set them up straight will possibly do more harm to their body. Trump is a lunatic. He is a madman. And if he saw this broken country together, he is going to jump on the body and stomp all the bones. This man is insane. He has nothing to lose. And on top of that, because of all of his criminal cases, he now has a vendetta against the system. I would not be surprised if he tries to lock up Letitia James or Fannie Willis or any of the black prosecutors who have been going on his ass, because let's keep it real, none of the white prosecutors ever want to go at Trump. None of the white prosecutors want to indict Trump other than Jack Smith for the federal government, and that's because he can get Secret Service, because the rest of the white state prosecutors around the nation don't want to indict Trump. Why? Because they're scared of the backlash from the white community. When you fight white supremacy as a white person, you become a target to the white supremacists or the people who are sympathetic towards their cause. Anyway, in this article, let's talk about what black men want. We want a nation that is not incarceral. We don't want a nation that continues to have punitive results in the criminal justice system. We want a nation that actually does something about unemployment or underemployment. We want a nation that actually guarantees universal health care to people and universal higher education free of charge for people, all things that black people need, as well as reparations for the descendants of black Americans who are descended from the people who were enslaved in our nation for about 200 years 150 odd years or so after the formation of the United States. We are owed reparations, right? And if y'all don't want to say Simon Hill, it keeps it trail, is qualified to get reparations either, because my mother comes from Belize, even though my father is Black American and I only identify as Black American and I rep that Louisiana till I die, whatever, man. Y'all don't have to include me in the reparations, but this is something that needs to be done. We need reparations for Black Americans. We need the ending of all these sorts of petty laws that make it harder for Black men to live if they are convicted for a crime or even arrested for a crime. We need actually something to stop these racist police in Florida and all across the nation from murdering us and getting away with it. We need the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to pass. We need a crime bill that specifically, fights against these white supremacists who are targeting Black people all over the nation. Biden needs to be working on that, right? But Biden also has a bigger issue on his hands, and that is the war in Gaza. Now, in my live stream yesterday, where I talked about Arab, the sentiment in the Arab lands towards racism, anti-black racism, and that sort of thing, I made a statement in my live stream and also on my community tab that any Black person who is protesting against the genocide, the obvious genocide that is happening in Gaza, and they are a college student, they deserve whatever negative thing happens to them, because in the Arab lands, throughout the Arab lands, Black people are treated the worst. Black people are treated like third class citizens, non-citizens, in these Arab countries where there are a ton of Black people. If y'all remember from my live stream yesterday, 2 million Black people live in Iraq. Think about that, man. And let's talk about Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? In these nations, Black people are called slaves to their face. They're not given jobs, not given opportunities. They're not given political representation. They're made fun of in mass media. Blackface is done in the Arab lands, and that includes Palestine, the West Bank, and Gaza. And they eat it all up. They eat it all up, and it's not okay. It's not okay. Any Black person fighting for those people does not deserve sympathy from me or from you if you are listening to this and you so happen to agree with me. We need to be minding our own business, because let's keep it real. Let's keep it a buck. No Arab would ever lose their college scholarships, their graduate degrees, their postdoctorate degrees, whatever, over Black Lives Matter. Have any non-Black people lost any opportunities fighting for Black Lives Matter? I know somebody's going to bring up Heather Heyer, the white woman who was killed in South Carolina by that racist white supremacist at Charlottesville, right? Yeah, there have been white people who have been hurt fighting on behalf of Black people, right? What is his name? The guy who went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, or whatever, and shot those people. I want to say his name is Dylan Roof, but the other guy who went to who beat the charge, he beat the charge because he killed one white person and shot another white man's arm off. Right? I forgot his name, but y'all put it in the chat if y'all remember his name. I forgot it. But yeah, those white people got hurt fighting for Black Lives Matter. But by and large, there are way too many Black people out here getting arrested, getting harassed, and sometimes even losing opportunities that could really change their lives and their families' lives over an issue that has nothing to do with us. I repeat, the only people we should be concerned about in the Arab world are Black Arabs, because those are our Jews. I'm going to keep it real. Anyway, this is an interesting article from the New York Times, at least by the title, and I'm going to be reacting to this one as well because I have not read it beforehand. So, why anti-war protests haven't flared up at Black colleges like Morehouse? The White House appears anxious about President Biden's coming speech at Morehouse College, but for complex reasons, such campuses have had far less visible Gaza tensions. So here's Morehouse College right here. At Morehouse College in Atlanta, discontent over the Gaza war has played out relatively quietly in classrooms and auditoriums rather than on campus lawns. This was written by Maya King and Reed J. Epstein, and I believe these are the same people that wrote this article as well. Reed J. Epstein and Maya King. Okay, they are a power couple out here. So, May 11th, 2024, as President Biden prepares to give graduation remarks this month at Morehouse College in Atlanta, a prestigious historically Black institution, the White House is signaling anxiety about the potential for protests over the war in Gaza. During a recent visit to Atlanta, Vice President Kamala Harris stopped to ask the Morehouse student government president about the sentiment on campus about the conflict, how students felt about Mr. Biden's visit, and what the graduating class would like to hear from him on May 19th. Then on Friday, the White House dispatched the leader of its public engagement office and one of its most senior black officials, Stephen K. Benjamin, to the Morehouse campus for meetings to take the temperature of students, faculty members, and administrators. The reasons for concern are clear. Nationwide demonstrations over the war and Mr. Biden's approach to it have inflamed more than 60 colleges and universities, stoked tensions within the Democratic Party, and created a new headache for his reelection bid. Yet Mr. Biden appears to be entering a different type of scene at Morehouse. While anger over the war remains palpable at Morehouse and other historically black colleges and universities, these campuses have been largely free of turmoil, and tensions are far less evident. No encampments, few loud protests, and a little sign of Palestinian flags flying from dorm windows. The reasons stem from political, cultural, and socioeconomic differences with other institutions of higher learning. While HBCUs host a range of political views, domestic concerns tend to outweigh foreign policy in the minds of most students. Many started lower on the economic ladder and are more intently focused on their education and their job prospects after graduation. At Morehouse, which has a legacy of civil rights protests and is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s alma mater, discontent over the Gaza war has played out in classrooms and auditoriums rather than on campus lawns. This should not be a place that cancels people regardless of if we agree with them, David Thomas, the Morehouse president, said in an interview on Thursday. Of Mr. Biden's visit, he said, whether people support the decision or not, they are committed to having it happen on our campus in a way that doesn't undermine the integrity or dignity of the school. All right. So I don't know what the people are doing here. Are they playing squash? A mural on the Morehouse campus showing current and past college presidents. Commencement at the school tends to be a solemn affair. So here are the former presidents of Morehouse. And I think that boy is playing lacrosse. That's what it is. He's playing lacrosse. Okay. All right. Some students have held contentious meetings with university leaders and urged them to rescind Mr. Biden's invitation, and a small group of faculty members has vowed not to attend commencement. Some alumni wrote a letter expressing worries that student protesters could be punished, noting Morehouse's history of celebrating student activists long after they have graduated. But the college might appear politically safer for the president to visit than many others. Morehouse is a custom bound place where undergraduates traditionally do not step on the grass in the heart of campus until they receive their degrees. Alumni view commencement as a distinguished event not only for students but also for scores of family and community members, making it a less likely venue for a major disruption. Mr. Biden chose to speak at Morehouse after the White House had received invitations from an array of colleges. It will be the third time in 4 years he has addressed graduates of a historically black institution. He has also spoken at commencement for one military academy each year. Among those lobbying Mr. Biden to come to Morehouse was Cedric Richmond, a member of the college's class of 1995 who ran Mr. Biden's public engagement office and is now a senior advisor at the Democratic National Committee. Mr. Richmond, who has a nephew at Morehouse, predicted Mr. Biden would speak about the high expectations of the college's alumni, promote his record of reducing black unemployment and narrowing the racial wealth gap, and deliver familiar exhortations about perseverance. Mr. Richmond does not think Mr. Biden will face protests. The Morehouse College graduation, at least as I remember it, is a very solemn event, he said. You have almost 500 African American males walking across that stage whose parents and grandparents sacrificed, and those students worked their butts off to, one, get into Morehouse, and two, to graduate. That's a very significant day, and I'm just not sure whether students or protesters are going to interfere with that solemn moment. Vice President Harris, who graduated from Howard University, another historically black institution, is engaged in her own virtual tour of such colleges. A congratulatory video she recorded will be played for graduates at 44 HBCUs. She is often introduced as a surprise guest and greeted with cheers. In Atlanta last month, Miss Harris asked the Morehouse Student Government President, Mackay Perrin, what approach Mr. Biden should take in his address. I think really she was just trying to gain an idea of what exactly students' issues were, and with this coming, sorry, what this sorry, I think really she was trying to gain an idea of what exactly students' issues were with his coming, if any at all, Mr. Perrin said, and what would kind of shift that narrative. All right, Mr. Biden has been trailed by Gaza protesters for months. The last time she spoke at a 4-year college campus was in January when demonstrators interrupted him at least 10 times during a rally at George Mason University in Virginia. Morehouse's traditions are strong. Dr. King said it was a place where he had advanced his understanding of nonviolent protest and moral leadership, which current Morehouse students say they take seriously. I feel like the protests do not need to come out because if you don't see students advocating for what they believe in, then the change sorry, I feel like the protests do need to come out because if you don't see students advocating for what they believe in, then the change that they're advocating for will never come about, said Benjamin Bayless, a Morehouse junior. Looking toward the statue on. Okay, what do we actually believe in as black men? What do we actually believe in as black men? Do we believe in advocating for a group of people who literally will look at a black man like this and say, Zenchi, Zanj, Abd, you cannot marry our daughters, you cannot work in our businesses, we don't want you working in the front of our restaurants or our banks, you will work in the back like a slave? Is that what we believe in? Yes, it's a genocide what's happening in Palestine, but where's our self-respect as black men? What we believe in is advocating for all people. Black people have been advocating for the justice and rights of all people since we came to the shores of the United States. Since we came to the shores of the United States, we have been the ones talking about humanism and freedom for all and lift all boats. A rising tide lifts all boats and all that sort of stuff. We have been the one talking about that. And what has the rest of the world met us with? The Asians hate us, the Arabs hate us, the Turks hate us, everybody hates black people, especially black Americans, because we are the people who consistently stand up to white supremacy. And it's such a foreign concept in their minds because all the other groups of people know how to do is bow down to white supremacists. But we don't. We don't. We consistently fight back against white supremacy, yet and still, we still get disrespected by other groups of people, even though we advocate for them. Enough is enough. We are done with that. And we as black men, if you really feel about it for Palestine, stand up at Morehouse and say, stop the genocide, Joe. Stop the genocide, Joe. Do it. Do it. Do it. And I hope security escorts you out. You do not get your degree and you can go work in Gaza as an English teacher. You can go work in the West Bank as an ESL translator while you get called slaved, abd, and zanj all day. I hope that happens to you. Anybody who wants to try to do that. Uh, Dr. King might have done some stuff like that, but Dr. King got it wrong. All right, we got to keep it real. Some of our elders got it wrong. This universal humanism that some black people like to uphold, it is not working for us. Because every time we say stop the genocide, what do the Arabs say? Stop coming to our countries. We hate you niggas. And they put on blackface on TV and call our women prostitutes and our children monkeys. This is on Arab TV. Is this who we're really fighting for? F them. F them. Anyway, continuing here. Um, so continuing, yet even as some students feel compelled to protest, outside factors can shape their decisions. Roughly 75% of students at HBCUs, including 50% of Morehouse students, are eligible for the Pell Grant, a federal aid program for low-income students. More than 80% of Morehouse students receive some form of financial aid. In the class of 2024, nearly a third of graduates will be the first in their family to receive a bachelor's degree. Some students at black colleges also may decide against protesting because of family pressure, which amplifies the importance of securing their degrees. Your student body at Columbia is very different than the student body at, say, Dillard, said Walter Kimbrough, who spent a decade as president of Dillard University, a historically black institution in New Orleans. It doesn't mean that people aren't concerned, but they understand that they have some different kinds of stakes. The stakes are also high for Mr. Biden, whose standing with black voters has softened ahead of November's presidential election. Young people are less enthusiastic about voting at all, partly because of Mr. Biden's handling of the Gaza war, but also because they are unhappy with the choice between him and former President Donald J. Trump. I think it's really just picking the lesser of two evils, said Fredrell Rhea Green II, a Morehouse freshman. Anything better than Donald Trump, a madman, a quote-unquote tyrant, is better for me. Absolutely, as it should be. Shout out to Fredrell. Any black man named the second, he's Trill. He's Trill. If you're the second or the third, you a Trill brother, automatically. But I would never name my son Simon. He's got to have a hard name. He's got to have a hard name, like metal. Mettle. Continuing here. Joe Biden is probably a very nice person, said Samuel Livingston, an associate professor of Africana studies at Morehouse. But niceness is not the level of leadership that we need. We need ethical leadership, and continuing to support the aiding, abetting, and the stripping of Palestinian land from Palestinian people in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip is not ethical. Some students, like Ozzie Birdsell, a senior studying kinesiology and journalism, support their classmates' protests, but fear a possible response from the police to a crowd of largely black young men. Interesting. Yeah. Ozzie Birdsdale in his office at the Maroon Tiger, Morehouse's student led news organization, right here. So, do we get tear gas? Said Mr. Birdsell, the editor in chief of the Maroon Tiger, the school student newspaper. Do we get arrested? That would not be the greatest look for a Morehouse college graduation. Now, one thing that I don't like, okay, a reason not to protest is not because we are Morehouse men and this is not how Morehouse men act. And, our tradition is that we don't even step on the grass until we graduate. That's not a good reason to not protest. Okay, this respectability, this binding into tradition. This is not a good reason to abstain from advocating for the Palestinian cause. Okay, this is what timid Negroes do. This is what Negroes with no backbone do. This is what Negroes who are more about how they tie their Windsor knot more than actually how they raise their black fist or revolutionary action. Those are the type of Negroes who think about that sort of stuff. We're not concerned about how it looks or the optics of Morehouse men to be engaging in rowdy radical protests. Because if we were talking about for example, they start rolling back voting rights, right? And the Biden administration is in charge of that, making it harder for black people to vote. We should be turned up about that, and your Morehouse man status should not matter. If they were, bringing back those mandatory sentencing laws, or harping up, increasing those mandatory sentencing laws that will disproportionately place black men in jail for longer periods of time. We should be turning up about that, right? If they were trying to bring back Jim Crow, even, like, not to say even as if the other things were, more dangerous, but if they were literally trying to bring back Jim Crow or legal segregation, we should turn up about that. But turning up about the Palestinians is not what should motivate black men, right? Under no circumstances. Under no circumstances. Unless you are a black Arab, stay out of this. Stay out of this for real. And yeah, the Morehouse man tradition, graduation thing, like, that's just silly to me. Continuing here. So, Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, a 1991 Morehouse alumnus, said that he hoped Mr. Biden would highlight his record and his agenda, but that there was little the president could say about the Gaza conflict to assuage his critics on campus. While what he says is important, Mr. Warnock said, trying to put himself in the shoes of student protesters, I think much more important is what he does in the future. So, shout out to Maya King and Jay Epstein, whatever, for writing this article. Once again, these brothers here who worked very hard to graduate, I wish them the best in their future. I hope they succeed in everything that they try to do as young black men who now have some education from a very prestigious institution. I believe Morehouse is respected even by people who only are familiar with PWIs, right? So yeah, I think Morehouse is like the Jay-Z or Lil Wayne of colleges for black people, right? Those are the ones. Those are the only ones white people know. Howard, FAMU, Morehouse. These are the ones only white people know, right? So I'm very glad to see these young brothers are about to graduate. And I hope that there are no protests from these young black men on behalf of the Palestinians. It would be absolutely silly and ridiculous for them to try to do something like that, right? Don't throw away your future over a group of people you'll never be able to meet and who literally do not care about black lives. Anyway, I want to go to the next story right here. This story I find interesting. All right. This story I found interesting because of how ridiculous these companies are when they sell products to black people, but literally do not even consult black people. I'm going to read this. Who is that color? A makeup brand is said to miss the mark by several shades. Beauty influencers have criticized Youthforia, saying the brand didn't adequately test the darkest shade of its date night skin tint serum foundation. Very interesting. Now, I'm not a woman, but I am sensitive to the issues of black women, and I care about black women as well. So this is why I'm going to be reading this story. Plus, I just thought the caption, the photo, the image they used was deftly hilarious, right? Going here to the comments, Kamal says, "This propels my Blacksit ambition." Shout out to Kamal as well. I don't know where you come from, but I hope whatever you decide to do in life, you become successful and that you find peace and happiness for yourself, whether you be black, white, or anything else, right? Everybody deserves to live in this world, and have the full capability to be as happy and free as they want to be. So let's continue here into this story. So the beauty influencer Gloria George modeled the darkest available shade of Youthforia Foundation in a TikTok video that has been seen over 34 million times. This was written by Sandra E. Garcia, published on May 10th, 2024. When Youthforia, a young makeup line that once received a nearly $500,000 investment from one of the celebrity investors on Shark Tank, released its darkest foundation yet, a collective hot sigh among black women could be heard across social media. In the past, beauty brands, including many industry heavy hitters, have fumbled products for darker skin tones, and the quality of new complexion matching cosmetics remains inconsistent. Gloria George, a dark skinned beauty influencer who lives in Texas, was tipped off about the release by her followers, who tagged her on other reviews of the new shade, and she decided to buy the foundation. But when she tried on the shade, she immediately got angry. She drove to the nearest Target and bought a small jar of black acrylic paint. In a video she posted to TikTok last week, Miss George applies the jet black paint to one cheek with a brush, then does the same for the other side with Youthforia Shade 600 Foundation. Stone face, she looks directly into the camera and asks, "Enough. Who is that color?" The video in which Miss George calls the shade tar in a bottle has been seen over 34 million times, and others have posted similar videos. I'm going to try to play the video right here. Let's, y'all, she's one is absolutely hilarious. Yeah, I have not heard of this brand, but I think it's actually a shame that a big brand or any sort of company would not actually try to consult black women or have them around, or actually try to go to experts who know black women to get the actual color that they need, right? Beauty standards for black women are set very, very high, and black women are the most under pressure from beauty standards in our society. So having products that are there for them as women to be able to beautify themselves is very important, right? In a society where black women constantly have their self-esteem diminished by everybody around them, right? It's important that we are able in our society to have products, services, industries that cater to the needs of black women specifically. And this, I feel like, is just a big troll. Continuing here. So after the woman on TikTok posted the video, Miss George said her anger turned to sadness. The beauty industry really does not care about dark skinned women, Miss George said in a phone interview. We're not seen as humans, and it's really freaking sad. Black beauty is already so rough as is, she added. The only thing we asked for was to be included. If anybody of a lighter complexion can go into Sephora and Ulta and get their shade with no problem. Foundations, bronzer, contours. Why shouldn't I be able to? Why do I have to then become a cosmetic chemist in my room and start mixing stuff to create my shades instead of just being included on the first time? Here's what we know about the controversy surrounding the brand's latest release. What is Youthforia? Youthforia is a makeup brand that debuted in 2020 with a single product, a shimmering lip gloss that the company's founder sold out of her apartment during the COVID lockdown. In the vast landscape of makeup lines already on the market, Youthforia has tried to set itself apart by saying that consumers could sleep in its makeup. In a March 2023 episode of Shark Tank, Euphoria's founder, Fiona Ko-Chan, okay, all right, now I understand. Now I understand. I got it now. Chan, yeah, this is the Asian woman who probably has anti-black bias, doesn't want black people around her. This is something that I have to struggle with in myself, but it is also something backed up with evidence. I truly believe that so many Asians have anti-black feelings and thoughts within them that it sort of comes natural to them. Now, I understand that this sort of bias might also make me prejudiced against Asians in a certain way. Not that I dislike Asian people just for being Asian people, but because there might be a lot of anti black bias in their brains when I first meet them. I know I have to check myself sometime, and I know I shouldn't jump to conclusions that Fiona Ko-chan is even Asian, because who knows, she could be from a different nationality or something like that. But I'm bringing up this separate point, and this is something that I've been struggling with in my mind. Is it discriminatory to believe that with some evidence a certain person could also be inherently or more likely to be racist or discriminatory, and specifically in this case for Asian people, right? Because from my experiences with a lot of Asian people and also learning about anti-blackness in the Asian world, right, it's very, very prominent. And yeah, it's something that I would like to know what y'all think about that. Do y'all think it's discriminatory to assume automatically that somebody might have anti-blackness in them to a greater degree than another person because of their racial or ethnic background? Because this is something that I somewhat hold in my heart or hold in my mind whenever I meet Asian people. Not that I'm rude or disrespectful to Asian people, but it is something that I do consider as well, right? Continuing here. So in March 2023, in a March 2023 episode of Shark Tank, Youthphoria's founder Fiona Ko-chan secured a $400,000 investment from the billionaire Mark Cuban on the strength of her pitch about the company's bio-based beauty products, including a color-changing blush oil that the company claims interacts with the skin's pH to provide the perfect flush. I wanted makeup that acted like skincare, that if I wore it, it would make my skin better, Miss Chan said on the show. How have previous product drops fared? Last year, when the brand released its Date Night Skin Tint Serum Foundation, why does makeup for women have such long names? Like, you never see products for men like this. Like, we have deodorant, Old Spice, uh ice cool, sporty, minty. You never hear we never have products for men that have these long ass names. You cannot spell you cannot sell Old Spice Date Night Tint Serum Scent. Like, what the hell is that? Women understand this better, but I'm still covering the story. Let's go. So last year, when the brand released its Date Night Skin Tint Serum Foundation, say that 5 times fast, it drew criticism for including only 4 shades for dark skin. Even the darkest shade, called Deep Neutral, was not dark enough for Miss George to be able to use, according to a video she posted at the time. In a TikTok video that has been deleted, Miss Chan apologized for the relatively narrow range of shades in the initial batch, adding that more shades were being developed and that the first drop was simply a proof of concept. Miss Chan and representatives for Youthphoria have not responded to numerous requests for comment for this article. But on April 24th, the Youthphoria TikTok account uploaded a video in which Miss Chan responds to comments that reads, "So about the last foundation shade?" In the video, Miss Chan races around a mall street casting to find someone to model the darkest shade of Youthphoria foundation. In a photo booth, she takes pictures of 2 young men on whom she has applied shade 600. Now our shade grid is finally complete. Miss Chan says in a voiceover, "I'm so excited to launch these 10 new shades." What a horrible, horrible way. What a horrible, horrible way of trying to like prove your point. That's absolutely horrible. Oh God, that's bad. That's really bad. We're gonna run around the city in a TikTok video and try to find 2 of the darkest black men we could find and take photos with them and say, "See, look, we have the shade that we needed." All right. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I'm going to go into Rada. He responded to my question, and I really like when people respond to my questions. This makes me happy when people respond to the questions that I ask to the audience, because this is supposed to be a conversation between the audience. Rada says it's not discriminatory to assume. However, it's your responsibility to be courteous regardless of skin color. Asian culture is very insulated, but the further generations go, the better they act to us. I would say, yeah, I would say, yeah, it is important that we treat all people with respect first and foremost, because everybody should be treated with respect until they disrespect you, right? So yeah, of course I agree with you, Rada, 1,000 times about that. My thing is though, should I? you're saying it's not wrong to assume, but I feel like even me assuming might be wrong. And this is me being hypercritical of myself, because you never know what people are thinking about me as a black man, right? Of course, people might have all the traditional stereotypes in black men, but there's also one weird stereotype that people have, that black men are inherently mad or angry at every other group of people, right? There are white people who believe every black man is just mad at white people deep down inside, right? So yeah, that's not true. We all know that's not true. White black people by and large don't just hate white people, right? So yeah, it's also can be true. And I don't know this because I will never be Asian and I don't have that many interactions with Asians. But the question is this: because of the anti blackness that is endemic in their culture, from what I've seen and studied, is it more likely for me to assume that about a person, and that can be okay? I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, but I would still like to know and have that conversation back and forth about that sort of thing. You get what I'm saying? But thank you, Rada, for answering that question and dropping your 2 cents about it. And anybody else who wants to give their 2 cents about anything, put it in the chat and I will reply to it. So let's go here too. How could a foundation be jet black? Javon Ford, a cosmetic chemist in Los Angeles who has worked with popular beauty and skincare brands like Milani and Youth to the People, was not involved in the formulation of any Youthforia products. But based on his experience with similar brands, he has an idea where Youthforia may have gone wrong. What I think happened is that they did not have a color benchmark, he said. A color benchmark is basically a reference that the manufacturer or lab has to follow to match. According to Mr. Ford, brands will often use competitors' foundations, such as those manufactured by NARS or Fenty Beauty, whose initial 40 shade drop in 2017 was a game changer in an industry that had often treated shade for dark skin as an afterthought, to make sure that they are at least meeting the standard. Interesting, interesting. So these other companies basically just copy from NARS or Fenty. Interesting. Yeah. Or they also just use a standard color and said, "Oh, this is jet black," and maybe somebody will be like this. Let's just put this out there. So it seems like Euphoria was sort of taking a step back in the cosmetics industry when so many revolutionary changes happened to move it forward, like Rihanna's Fenty brand. Continuing here. Could the foundation possibly match someone? When Mr. Ford inspected the ingredient list for the foundation, he found that the formula contains a small amount of white base in it, which has the effect of making the undertones of the foundation dark gray. It is not just a human shade. It is just not a human shade, Mr. Ford said. Nobody is gray. Nobody is pitch black because there are undertones. Very interesting as well. So he's also saying that the product itself was faulty because there's white in it, mixed in it somehow, right? Which then turns the color gray. Is Youthforia still selling Shade 600? Yes, the Date Night Skin Tint Serum Foundation. Please, please, can y'all use acronyms? Or can y'all use shorter names? There are no products for men sold like this. We don't sell shaving cream, razors, underwear, gym shorts, nothing like this with long ass names. I'm scared to ask my wife now, hey, what's the name of your foundation or bronzer or something? Oh, she's gonna be like, oh, my MAC lip gloss 9206. Jesus Christ, this is insane. All right. Yes, the Date Night Skin Tint Serum Foundation, which Youthforia sells in 1.18-ounce bottles for $48 a piece in shade 600, is still available on the brand's website and at Ulta. $48 a piece. Women, oh God, I don't know how women do it, man. Don't women know men really only care about that? We only care about that thing. That thing, that thing, that thing. Either way, I'm very sorry that this happened to the sister. The cosmetic industry actually needs to take more serious consideration when developing their products for black women and not make stuff like this, which makes their companies and their brands and their industry entirely look like a joke and kind of racist. And in closing, we will be reading this final article right here. Black men don't do therapy, or so I thought. And this is from New York Magazine, I believe. And it's titled, this. And I thought this was interesting because as black men, as we go through intergenerational trauma, as we deal with so many things in our lives that affect us in deep ways, right? Of course, the normal things about being a man in this world, you're going to deal with success, loss, pain, joy, victory, defeat, all sorts of things like that. We also have the added issues that we have to deal with because of anti-black racism in this world against black men. So therapy is important. It is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. for a long time, but I literally do not have the money. So if you want Simon Hill Keeps It Trill off YouTube, how about this? You donate to my YouTube channel. You send a super chat for like $500. I'll book a session, and then I'll pay for the rest. Okay, then y'all will never see me again, or at least until my sessions run out, and I gotta come back and beg for more money and more donations. But yeah, let's go into the comments here. Rada says, "LOL, the names of makeup products get so complicated, like cars almost." Absolutely, that's the only thing you can sell to men with long ass names, and even then, the names don't be that long. The Dodge Challenger 200, Mercedes E-Class. The sixth series Benz. Like that's it. Like the only thing you can sell to men with long names are cars and maybe power tools. But even then, like 4 words max. Women be having like whole soliloquies for the name of their makeup products. It's absolutely crazy. anyway, black men don't go to therapy. Let's read about this. This was written by Ismail Mohammed, published on May 18th, 2023. In 10th grade, a Jewish kid who had just gained admission to the high school I attended, a magnet school established to combat racial segregation by admitting students from across Los Angeles, showed up in my Japanese class. We were a cadre of Korean, black, and Latino students who had been drawn to the class by curiosity about Japanese culture, and the sudden presence of a white student in the middle of the semester piqued our interest. In skinny jeans and sleek glasses, he reminded me of Rivers Cuomo, who became we became fast friends. Who the hell is Rivers Cuomo? Does anybody know who that is? I am not that old. How I don't Ismail Muhammad. Okay, he's a black. Supposedly he's a black man. I assume so because he's writing about black men going to therapy. Ismail Muhammad, his father might be in the Nation of Islam, or he could be an immigrant. I don't know, but very interesting. Who the hell is Rivers Cuomo? Very interesting how the stars of yesteryear faded away. Rivers Cuomo is the guy from Weezer. Okay, the skinny guy with the glasses. Okay. Yeah, I'd never listened to much Weezer. I'm more of a System of a Down guy. Linkin Park. Who else do I listen to? Just random rock songs. I mean, I don't listen to a lot of rock and roll, but my go-to for rock and roll is System of a Down, and that's it. Shout out to Serge Tankian, real G, OG, for real, for real. And I never got into Rage Against the Machine. For some reason, I could not get into Rage Against the Machine. I'm all about angry political music, but something about Rage don't sit right with me. I don't know why. Is anybody else here a Rage Against the Machine fan? I always thought System of a Down was more authentic and real, and they talked more about the issues that I cared about, like America's foreign policy. You know what I mean? I don't know. Rage Against the Machine comes across like those sweaty hippies who talk about socialism and communism, but then all they do is smoke weed all day and don't shower. Right. System of a Down seems more like we're gonna mask up and really put in some work for the cause. I don't know. And Weezer just seemed weird to me. Yeah, couldn't get into Nirvana either. Yeah, the rock music I'm into is not Weezer, I would say. Yeah, Raider says I'm mostly a rock and roll kind of guy, specifically emo and post-hardcore. Unfortunately, it's very niche, but black punk, Afro punk is growing. Thank fuck. Thank fuck. What type of phrase is that? Thank fuck. I like that. I like that. It gets better than so Raider says it gets better the more specific and niche you go. I don't like a lot of mainstream stuff. That's the thing. It seems like rock and roll did not die. It just became very niche. It rock and roll became sort of like there's like one band that has like 1,000 fans, but there's 1,000 bands, right? There's 1,000 bands with 1,000 fans, so that makes like 1 million rock and roll fans. You get what I'm saying? That's what it seems like what happened to the genre. It's different than hip hop, where it's like one artist like Kanye West has like 10 million fans and sucks up all the air out of the room. You get what I'm saying? I don't know, but you explain more to me about rock and roll and what happened to the genre and that sort of stuff. Gonna continue here. So I don't know why. When he and I were talking about afternoon plans, his casual mention that he was going to therapy irked me so much. Therapy? I'd known him long enough that I grasped the rough details of his family life. 2 professional parents and a younger sister living about 20-minute drive north of my own family on a quiet street in the Miracle Mile district. What did a white kid living that kind of life need with therapy? For anybody who's going to say the Jews aren't white, Jews are white, shut up. Anyway, thinking back on the exchange, I'm embarrassed by my presumptiveness, but also surprised at what it seemed to register. Some people definitely needed therapy, I realized, and did not seek it out. like my extended family, many of whom were haunted by drug addiction and the pain of gun violence. But seeking it out in the first place seemed to me like a blemish, an admission of defeat. My aversion to therapy was probably a result of a misunderstanding about what therapy is for. In my mind, it was a crutch for those whose minds and hearts were broken, who had something fundamentally wrong with them. I can't say how I absorbed these thoughts, but one way or another, it was clear to me that someone's need for therapy was bound up in my perception of their strength and the integrity of their personhood. I admired my parents, a couple of latter day Horatio Algers who grew up in South Los Angeles and Detroit at the height of the 1960s civil unrest and were witness to some of the most heinous, demoralizing, terrifying violence in this nation's history. My parents experienced all this and came out on the other side, injured but proud. There was dignity in that. I felt a quiet strength you exercised by biting your tongue as hard as you needed to, even if you severed it. Unfortunately, my inner life didn't match my parents' steeliness. I was a moody kid, prone to melancholic jags. My mom loves to clown me about how, at 6 years old, I would put on an old Don McLean LP of hers, the American Pie album, and set the needle down on Vincent, McLean's mournful paean to Vincent van Gogh's volatility. Sitting in a chair next to the record player, I'd play the song over and over and over, listening tearfully. When my favorite TV characters died, I'd mourn them, staying in my feelings for days at a time. When I became a teenager, I spent flat, sunny LA days listening to Radiohead, trying to conjure a vibe that felt closer to my baseline emotional state. Culture became a prosthesis, a way to manage and explore my psychology. If I had no idea how to develop an intimate relationship with myself, art was acceptable. Art was an acceptable way to understand feeling. I find it, I I don't know how to say this. I grew up in a house that was filled with music, but it was mostly my music, right? For some reason, right? And by the way, realist American jumped into the chat. He sent an American flag and a black fist. Shout out to you, brother, wherever you are, whoever you are, right? But I want to say this. I grew up in a musical house, right? Uh, but we didn't have like a record player in the house. And for some reason, my parents got the vinyl collection like after we left the house. So I went to college and then I come back from college and like now we got the Sade LPs, now we got the record player, now we got, like libraries of records. I'm like, where was this at when I was coming up? Because when I was a kid growing up, I was listening to Nas, Jay-Z, Biggie, Tupac, all that dirty, nasty rap, right? All that ghetto music that my parents used to say. They would come into my room, throw my CDs in the trash when they heard Tupac play Hit 'Em Up or something like that. All that sort of stuff. Like I grew up in a musical household. I grew up loving music, and hip hop is what I gravitated towards. Of course, I listened to like some Jimi Hendrix and, like I mentioned, System of a Down and stuff like that, Sade here and there, stuff like that. But my thing was like hip hop and like R&B and stuff like that, right? The '90s R&B specifically, for real. But I never how 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 can I say this? And I'm not trying to say this, but I'm trying to understand how a young black man in America coming up in racist ass America could gravitate to music like Radiohead or The Cure, Culture, what is his name? Don McLean. You get what I'm saying? Like, explain to me, if you're a black person who grew up listening to like rock and roll or, other types of music that are, how can I say this, not traditionally viewed as black music, and you know what I'm talking about. Don't act stupid. Of course, all music derives from black American music, specifically the blues, right? Or ragtime, that sort of stuff. But yeah, or jazz, right? But how do you end up in that space, right? Is it just exposure? Is it just taste? Because the thing is, like, I can never look at like Metallica or Pantera and then say, yep, I see myself in that. They're talking about things that relate to me. You get what I'm saying? But y'all explain that to me. So anyway, Rada jumped into the comments. He said, exactly. Like Rolling Stones is pretty much an ancient relic as far as the validity of their opinions go. I highly recommend getting into black musicians within the scene, like Loath or Cat Company. Thank you. Thank you, Rada, for the recommendations. I always love the recommendations. Tell me, Rada, what do you think about Lenny Kravitz? I would like to know your opinion as a presumably black person who listens to rock and roll, your opinion on Lenny Kravitz, and also And also, if you've heard of this guy, Gary Clark Jr., let me know what you think about Gary Clark Jr. and Lenny Kravitz, okay? Anyway, Rada also left another comment. He said, it's hard to get into, especially since you know that people like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles stole music from black people. Oh, and Freddie Mercury, too. Make sure you skip that guy. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I can't, of course these songs are great. Like the Beatles undoubtedly have great songs, right? Queen has great songs. Guns N' Roses have great songs, but the thing about music is that it should touch you and identify. You should be able to identify with it. So I'm like, how do black people end up in that space where you're growing up and you're like, yep, time to play that Nirvana? I don't know how you get in that space. I don't know how to get in that space. Anyway, continuing here. By the time I was an adult, this dissonance between how I was and how I wanted to be, or how I thought I should be, weighed on me. Things came to a head in 2015, mentally and emotionally exhausted after passing my qualifying exams during graduate studies at Cal Berkeley. I returned all my books to the campus library and laid down in bed for a week. I ate Trader Joe's cookies and binged Arrested Development before decamping back home to Los Angeles, while I crawled into bed and ate Ben and Jerry's while rewatching Mad Men for a few weeks more. When at first, yo, this is the one. I'm sorry, Ismail Muhammad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Arrested Development, eating Ben and Jerry's. Hey, I like Mad Men though. This is the thing, man. This is the thing. We as black people, we consume so much media, and because we're in America, we have to consume white people's media too, because obviously there's a dearth in the type of media that we would relate to. So I loved like Malcolm in the Middle. I love The Simpsons. I love Family Guy. Like, you know what I mean? I loved shit, what was the show? Everybody loves Raymond or something like that. What is it, King of Queens? You get what I'm saying? Like everybody's got like a favorite white sitcom, right? I grew up watching Brady Bunch on Nick at Night. You get what I'm saying? But bro, what are you doing in your teens? Mentally and emotionally exhausted after passing my qualifying exams during graduate studies at Cal Berkeley, I returned all my books to the campus library and laid down in bed for a week. I ate Trader Joe's cookies and binged Arrested Development before decamping back home to Los Angeles, where I crawled into bed and ate Ben and Jerry's while rewatching Mad Men for a few weeks more. What LA niggas are different. Y'all LA niggas are something different. You LA niggas are not like us. What type of shit is this? Who does this? Who does this? My guy. My guy. I crawled into bed and binge watched Mad Men while eating Ben and Jerry's. Boy, how long were you on your period? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What type of menopausal shit is this? Oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was very toxic. That was very toxic masculine of me. I don't care. But that's wild. You LA niggas are different. LA got some LA got some different type of boys, I swear. All right. What I first felt like luxuriating in success started to feel like misery, a desperation. I was confused and embarrassed by something about the process of studying for the exams had lowered a screen between myself and the world. The obsessive analytical frame that had been a boom in one part of my life became a burden in every other regard. It was like having a vindictive second head on my shoulder, a bummer party guest whispering clever skepticism into my ear. The anxiety over failure that characterized my year of preparation thickened instead of dissipating. So yeah, he's basically talking about, he was in school, and the exams were kicking his ass and he had stress about it, right? And I guess this is going to lead to him needing therapy. All right. Gonna go into the comments. Rada says, I'm biracial, grew up in a white majority city, lots of joke racist people, but I insist my taste in music is my own discovery. Lenny Kravitz had a really good hit in Fly Away at least. Who's the other guy I could give him in Kravitz? Listen, the other guy I'm talking about is Gary Clark Jr., and he goes hard in my opinion. So yeah, y'all check him out. That's the other guy I'm talking about. But yeah, very interesting that you only brought out Lenny Kravitz's hit Fly Away, because I think he also had the other hit American Woman, and Lenny Kravitz has like what, 27 albums or something like that. He's been going hard in the yard with the Pokemon cards for a while. But yeah, let me know what you think about that. Sorry to hear about your experiences growing up, in a mostly white enclave with people who are joking about racism, stuff like that. That's not cool. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. So I returned to Berkeley in the fall, my tongue between my teeth, worried about what admitting my difficulties might mean for academic progress. It turned out that a few of my friends, white women, this nigga, I can't. I can't, dog. I can't. It turned out a few of my friends, white women mostly, this nigga's either gay or a player or both. this, this boy wild. This is how you get. He says, I returned to Berkeley in the fall, my tongue between my teeth, worried about what admitting my difficulties might mean for academic progress. It turned out that a few of my friends, white women mostly, had been having similar struggles and begun making use of university approved therapists. When they told me about how they confided in these strangers, I politely listened and even contemplated seeking out my own therapist, but I couldn't quite shake my old reservations. I spent my days sitting in classrooms, reading in the California sun, taking notes in cafes. What does somebody like me need therapy for? I said this before and I'll say it again. I said this in the video about young Cabbage in the high school in California, where some Asian kid was making like very racist jokes against this biracial girl. California is just a different. California does not exist. California is not a real place. California is a place where niggas listen to like Empire of the Sun and write screenplays sitting at like Trader Joe's cafes. What type of shit is this? This is an alternate universe. You guys have to remember, like coming from Louisiana, this is unheard of. Niggas just sitting in the California sun, taking notes in cafes. What is happening here? And asking himself deep epistemological questions about the need for therapy as a black man. What type of shit is this? Oh God, oh God. Anyway, Raider says, I'll let you know what I think. Shout out to Raider. Y'all check out Gary Clark Jr. I highly suggest this song. This is my land, right? This is my land. Very dope song. And I love that album. I think the name of the album is This Is My Land too. And it's one of my favorite albums. Y'all go check out that Gary Clark Jr. This Is My Land album. It's a perfect, flawless album. If I was ever stranded on a desert island, I can't think of the definitive other albums I would take. I can't think of the definitive other albums I would take, but This Is My Land is one of them. I would take that album at least. I don't know. I don't even know if I would take a rap album with me if I was stranded on a desert island. I'm gonna keep it real with you. Like I would take the best of like Billie Holiday, like a big ass compilation, like 3 disc volume set of Billie Holiday to with me on the desert island, a Gary Clark Jr. album, and then I'm stuck between a Stevie Wonder album or a James Brown album. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Let me know what would be the 3 albums you would take on a desert island. Anyway, continuing here. As the fall wore on, though, ballooning distress compelled me to try. When I finally sat down with a handful of therapists, I was put off by what they asked me to explore: my childhood, my parents, my feelings. Oh God. Though I probably intuited that I needed a guide to help me explore my interior life, what I wanted was someone to help me troubleshoot what I interpreted as a malfunctioning brain, not plumb emotional depths that had been heretofore blocked. Eventually, I met a therapist who practiced cognitive behavioral therapy, an approach whose orientation toward problem solving suited me. CBT gave me language and strategies that were comfortable, a toolkit for conquering the knotty thicket of my emotions. A few months into working with this therapist, I went back home and nervously told my family about my decision and what had precipitated it. I'd learned to register, name, and acknowledge my feelings as a way of managing them rather than being overwhelmed. Immediately, I recognized the sheer fear I felt in trying to communicate all this to my brother and parents. The crestfallen look on my mother's face made me regret briefly telling them at all. Had she done something wrong as a parent, she asked me, as if I were undergoing treatment for an illness. She wondered how long I'd see my therapist. Sadness sneaked up on me as I tried to describe my emotional life to people who I knew loved me, but with whom I communicated through a haze of mutual discomfort. I'm not gonna lie, like if I had a kid and they told me, they were starting to go to therapy, of course I would be open minded, of course, and say, yeah, go get the mental health treatment you need. But on the other hand, I'd be like, damn, what you telling your therapist? You better not be saying that your daddy was some abusive asshole who ruined your life. Don't be over there trying to throw salt on my name. You get what I'm saying? Especially to no white therapist. You get what I'm saying? Nothing will be worse if you're a black father and you have a black son or daughter, and they go in there and they just say, "My daddy was the worst man that ever existed, that black bastard," you'd be pissed off. I would come in there and start whooping on the therapist and whooping on everybody, take off my belt and everything. That's crazy. You get what I'm saying? I don't know. Unless you really are that evil black daddy who just does horrible things to their kids, yeah, you deserve to get told on. You get what I'm saying? But no, imagine being a black father and your son goes to therapy. Now, it's okay to get therapy. I'm not trying to stigmatize therapy. I'm just saying, imagine if he's going in there and you really tried to be the best father you could be. And of course, no man is going to be perfect. But then your son is in there just bad mouthing you to this white woman, saying that you're the worst black man that ever walked the earth. That got to be pretty heartbreaking. You get what I'm saying? So I understand why his parents sort of reacted this way to telling them that he was going to therapy. But on the other hand, the parent is probably thinking, "What are you saying about us?" Because that's mostly what the therapists want to do. Telling me about your mother, telling me about your father, and then you sink into the sunken place as they twirl the spoon in the teacup. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm gonna go into the comments here. Rada, about the guy who's thinking about therapy. As someone who's been to therapy, there's nothing a therapist can do that a diary and a good friend can't. He needs a psychiatrist if he's dealing with something. And then he said, LOL. Yeah and no. I mean, everybody can deal with their sort of mental health issues or depression or stress or psychosis, in the way that they see fit and is best. I do believe therapy is important, but yeah, of course, if you're dealing with depression or bipolar or borderline personality disorder, yes, please go see a psychiatrist. Get them pills, get them shots, get a lobotomy, whatever you need. You get what I'm saying? But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know anything about that. But I would just say everybody try to seek help from wherever you think help is best that doesn't harm you or anybody else. That's what I'll say. All right. So my family and I realized, lacked the habits of thought and feeling that would let us be present for ourselves and one another. My therapist had pulled a sleight of hand, giving me the tools I wanted while knowing full well they would teach me how insufficient my understanding of therapy was, how much work it would take to explore and understand myself. That haze, I noticed, was the damage inherent in the version of strength that my parents had modeled for me and that I imagined their parents had modeled for them. That strength was a survival strategy in a world that had dealt us a thick history of loss, a generational coping mechanism far easier to adopt than self knowledge, especially when that knowledge might confer heart stopping grief. I couldn't go about fixing myself, quote unquote, any more than I could erase any of that loss. But I could learn to be in that world in a different way, to acknowledge and give voice to grief, and in the process, maybe encourage my family to do the same. All right, Ismail Muhammad is a story editor for the New York Magazine. All right, he has written about waves of migration to New York, diversity in publishing, and the filmmaker Tony Garrett Bradley. All right, very interesting bio right here. What was the name of the type of therapy he took? CBDT something? CBD oil? What type of was he taking? What was the name? Da, 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 da. Okay, she introduced me to. All right. Eventually, I met a therapist who practiced cognitive behavioral therapy, an approach whose orientation towards problem solving suited me. CBT gave me language and strategies that were comfortable, a toolkit for conquering, not a thicket of my emotions. I don't know exactly what CBT is. I'm just going to assume maybe it's sort of like a Socratic type method of way of asking and answering questions to yourself that lead you towards some sort of resolution or conclusion as to why you feel a certain way. So, somebody will ask you, why do you feel that way about that thing? And you'll say, well, I feel this way because it makes me angry. And then the person will say, why will that make you angry? Well, I feel angry about that because when this happens, this happens. And the person will say, well, why do you associate those two things together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's what I'm imagining it is. I don't know. Y'all can look it up. And if anybody knows what cognitive behavioral therapy is by definition, put it in the chat, please, and we'll discuss it. But either way, it's kind of annoying that he got. I feel like I'm tearing therapy apart right now, which is not the point. That is not the point of this live stream. I do think it's important for black men to get therapy. It's just this person in particular, Ismail Muhammad. He sort of lives a very interesting lifestyle as a black man that sort of I can't relate to some degree. But then again, most people couldn't relate to my life anyway. So anyway, I'm gonna read the comment from Rada. Rada's chopping it up heavy in the chat. He's saying, yeah, it's a good idea to seek help in general, but I think it's also common for people to waste their time on therapy when really they're walking around undiagnosed and projecting their traumas. Very, 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 very. Saying somebody is undiagnosed should be like the new slur. Like when somebody says, "You a bitch ass nigga," you reply, "Boy, you are undiagnosed." When a nigga turn up to you, when a nigga try to turn up and say like, "Oh, you a hoe," you say, "Sir, you need a CBT." Sir, I think you are skipped your medication. We need something like that. You know what I mean? We need to start using that sort of language. We need to use the language of healing. So you called me a bitch ass nigga. Let's unpack this together. You called me a hoe. Let's break this down. Tell me about your mother. Let's walk through this. Take your meds. Raider jumps into the chat and said, "Take your meds." Oh God, you know what I'm saying? We need to start using the language of therapy with each other as black men in our arguments. That way we can maybe de-escalate, right? We can maybe bring down the violence, bring down the animosity, bring down the chauvinism, the machismo, and maybe we wouldn't have so many, negative endings for us as black men when we have conflicts amongst each other. Let's unpack this together, my brother. I called you a hoe ass nigga. You call me a bitch ass nigga. Let's walk through this. So yeah, but yeah, I think that's a very good point you made, Rada. A lot of people maybe are projecting their own traumas onto other people and other situations, and that is it's. But I think if you're projecting traumas, that is not a, how can I say, a psychobiological. I like the language, but that's not something that maybe medication can solve. But that would be something that talking to a therapist or journaling or talking to a priest or being more religious, whatever, can help you deal with that trauma in a productive way, right? But when it comes to being undiagnosed and having like real, psycho biological disorders in your mind, of course, I think you should get, the treatment and talk to a psychiatrist who can put you on that right path. You get what I'm saying? Once again, I am not a therapist, but I do believe it is important for us. And the point I was trying to make earlier about the way he was going about it, one of the most annoying things about people that go to therapy is that they start talking like their therapist. And I feel like he started picking that up, and maybe that's a part of CPT or whatever. Funny, he's from Los Angeles and he's repping the CPT like he's Snoop Dogg or something. CBT, yeah, the cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever. I think, if you go to therapy, just leave it at the office and don't try to proselytize it to other people. Is what I would say. It's like religion. Therapy should be like religion. You keep it privately to yourself, and please don't try to, think you have the same. Abilities as your therapist, I would say. Uh, Rayna jumped into the comments. He said, "Yo, seriously, jumping topic a bit, but it's real. I see the Kendrick versus Drake beef, and all I see are a bunch of people cheering on what's essentially blood sport. All I see are unhealed black brothers. Good outlook on therapy. Yeah, I agree with you 1000%, Rada. I was just having this conversation today with my wife and her girlfriend about the Kendrick and Drake thing. We don't want to see. It's sort of we should. There, on one hand, we should be glad that hip hop is such a unique art form where this level of competition at the highest level brings out the best, because Drake made some amazing music. Kendrick made some ungodly amazing music in this whole de- debacle, fiasco, battle, beef, whatever you want to call it, right? And those other art forms, analyzing poetry, high level prose, and breaking down every single word bar for bar. No other art form has that. That shows the glory and beauty of Black American art. But on the other hand, we should be hypercritical that we are seeing two very intelligent, successful black men literally tear each other down in front of the world for them to see, right? And the majority of people who are streaming not like us or family matters, they don't look like us. You get what I'm saying? So they're going to be calling Drake a pedo and they're calling Kendrick a wife beater, right? This is now sort of like how they're going to have to walk forward in life. That should be something that we should be concerned about, right? I do think the battle got a bit low, and I do think that a lot of the black people who are encouraging Kendrick or saying that Kendrick won are saying are saying that Kendrick won because there is this gut reactionary thing within a lot of black men that says, yeah, what we need to be are more moral people. This is one of the biggest critiques I have of Kendrick Lamar, is that he was basically telling Drake, you need to pray, you need to do push-ups, you need to be with your son like I'm with my son who you never see. You need to be a more upstanding person. This is no different than a Christian conservative nationalist who says that everybody in America should try to bring God back in schools. We should bring prayer back in schools. Everybody should be a Bible thumping Christian and that sort of stuff. This is what Mr. Morale was trying to peddle to us, the audience, and bash Drake over the head with. I find that very, very problematic. You know, we as black people do not need to be more moral for the world to treat us better. We need the world to be more moral in and of itself, period. There's nothing flawed or inherently wrong with us as black people. But yet and still, a lot of people who don't realize it but are siding with Kendrick Lamar saying, yeah, Drake is a fallen, lost black man. He is a nigga. Ain't, let's keep it real. For all of Kendrick saying Drake shouldn't say nigga no more, what Kendrick was basically alluding to was that Drake had a lot of nigga qualities. You don't take care of your son. You got baby mamas all over the place. You got kids you hide. You're a sick degenerate who likes to have sex and drink all day and gamble. He was saying basically Kendrick was calling Drake a nigga in everything but the word. And yet and still, what Kendrick was trying to say is, I am Mr. Respectable. I am the man that people look up to. I am a true man. I am physically fit with big muscles, and I got my kids and I take care of them. And maybe even I slap my wife. Let's keep it real. There is a reason Kendrick did not answer the question as to whether he slapped his wife. I would argue that Kendrick, to some degree, plays into the idea that maybe he did slap his wife. Let's keep it absolutely real. Why did Kendrick not reply to the idea that he did slap his wife when Drake was bringing that up the entire time? I would argue that Kendrick views that as a part of his masculinity as well. Kendrick has now become this Hebrew Israelite who is Old Testament in his truth. There was not one time when he actually denied the allegations that Drake made that he was putting hands on Whitney. Kendrick might actually be playing the long game. We're playing this understated game by saying that, you know what, the type of masculinity that I represent means that I can smack my wife and I still can have my 3 kids with her in the house and still be a more moral man than you. I'm just putting that out there. This is what I find, kind of disgusting and weird about the whole Kendrick and Drake beef, because it sort of stopped being a rap beef and sort of became this sort of discourse about black male identity, who is black, who is not, who can say nigga, who is not. And meanwhile, we have this perverse world where a real Jew, an Orthodox, what we consider normal Jew, a person who came out of a Jewish vagina, is being challenged by a man who pretends to be a Jew and is told but and is telling the actual Jew that he is not a moral person. Meanwhile, the person telling him that is pretending in everything to be something that he is not. You get what I'm saying? I don't know. It's all weird. It's one of these. The Drake and Kendrick beef happened exactly the way I thought it would. It's going to be something that's debated until the end of time now. It's going to be, this is the unwinnable rap beef. While some people will say Kendrick won hands down outright, some people won, and I agree with that. Kendrick won the battle, but it will still be somewhat debatable, because as time unfolds, as the interviews unfold, as the situations happen to both artists, more and more things will come to the light about who was lying, who was telling the truth, who was actually Mr. Morale, that sort of stuff. I don't know. I don't know. Either way, this was a very interesting live stream. I want to say shout out to Rada. Shout out to who else jumped into the chat as well? Who else jumped into the chat? Realist American and Kamal as well for jumping into the chat. Shout out to all of y'all for listening and tuning in. Y'all subscribe to my channel. Y'all continue to like, share my content and stuff like that. Rada jumped in and left one more comment. He said, people say that Kendrick act like Drake should have responded when his house was getting shot up. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, it was real. Definitely a long conversation. Yeah, I mean, I'm here to chop it up with the people, but I'm about to go and chill. And yeah, y'all stay tuned. Tomorrow I might go live. Every day I'll try to go live. Y'all support my channel. My name is Simon Hill, and peace.